Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Pitch Challenge, the First Coast Pitch Challenge. It's the second one that we've done. And 8 companies will be pitching today. So I just want to briefly go over the rules, then I'll introduce the panel. And then each company will be able to do their pitch. So it's a 5-minute pitch with 5 minutes of Q&A and feedback from the panelists. I'll be timing all of the presentations, so please stick to the 5 minutes. I'll let you know when you're down to your last minute. I'd like to introduce the panelists. Today we have Barbara Schilberg. Thanks for being here, Barbara. Meram Klein. Nishant Rastogi, is that right? Rastogi. Rena Rosenberg. And Steve Saheb.
Oh, okay.
Did I say it right?
Yep, you said it.
I said it right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll start off with the first company. It'll be Steve Mason from Carogen. I hope so. I will try to get the notes. All of them except for
Everybody's going to be asleep.
Why don't you turn off the front lights and turn on the back lights?
Well, they don't.
That usually works if you can.
I guess that's the best we can do. Okay, why don't we go ahead and start? I'm afraid I don't know where to start. Think the lights are over here.
There you go.
Okay. Is that a little better? There you go.
At Carogen, our mission is to create transformative immunotherapies for serious diseases such as difficult to cure cancers and infectious disease, such as chronic hepatitis B virus. With almost 260 million people worldwide chronically infected with hepatitis B, and this standard of care really doesn't give a consistent cure. There's a large unmet medical need for cure with a huge upside market potential. What's really tragic about most of these people is they don't know they're infected, and they have a 15 to 40% lifetime chance of progression to cirrhosis and hepatocellular carcinoma. And often they don't know that they've progressed until it's too late. And that's why over 600,000 people die each year worldwide. So it's our goal, really our why at Carogen, to cure HBV. Carogen is a spin-out from Yale School of Medicine. We have a novel platform with broad applications. We've been focusing on HBV, although we've been moving also towards cancer lately. We have a clinical candidate that's selected, and we've had discussions with the FDA on our preclinical and clinical plan. We have issued and pending patents in 8 major markets, and we're seeking at least $10 million to progress us through phase 1 clinical trial. So you've heard our why. Now I'll tell you how Carogen will try to cure HBV, and that's using our virus-like vesicle platform, or VLV platform. Now this is an incredibly complex slide, and I'll just go through it with these numbers as they flash up, so if we all follow together, or sure we'll get through it together. So first, we've taken components of 2 different animal viruses, one for viral entry and one for viral replication. And then we've taken the genes for 3 of the major proteins of HPV and cloned them into the same vector as for the viral components. When we transfect this into mammalian cells, we get our product, our VLV. And when we take that VLV and infect in vivo, the antigens are expressed, including the HPV antigens. And this induces an antigen-specific antibody and T-cell response. And this, we hope, will clear the virus. So besides chronic hepatitis B in our pipeline, which is an IND enabling stage, and is a continuing collaboration with our academic collaborators, academic co-founders at Yale and Melbourne Medical School. We have projects now in colorectal cancer with collaboration with scientists at UConn Health, University of Connecticut Health. And very recently we started a project in ovarian cancer with collaboration with a different professor at Yale. And although we're taking slightly different tacks in each of these by delivering different antigens, different proteins, what's common between these is that we're also investigating the oncolytic potential of our VLVs in each of these cancer indications. And another strength of Carogen is the experience of our leadership team. Our senior management and co-founder group has at least 30 years of experience, for instance, with Bijan, our CEO, who's in the audience. And John Rose and Michael Robeck, our academic co-founders, are a formidable pair in virology and immunology. And the rest of our leadership team has over 20 years of experience each in either biopharma, biotech, or academic sciences. So what would we do with their $10 million, your $10 million? We would complete our candidate profiling by the end of the year, proceed into GMP manufacturing, GLP safety studies, which would enable us to file IND, and this would then allow us to perform a phase 1 clinical trial, which would be performed in HPV-infected patients. And this would not only give us our safety, but also would give us efficacy signal in this first phase 1 trial. So I'll summarize, but I have our Carogen has a highly experienced team, enabled and transformative platform, a robust pipeline. In HPV, we have a high unmet medical need and therefore a great market, issued and pending patents, strong academic alliances, and with our $10 million investment, we believe we'll be able to provide a significant ROI. And I'll stop there.
Thanks very much.
Just questions.
Are you thinking about immunogenicity at all? Is there a risk of immunogenicity?
Yes, there is.
And how are you going to address that?
So the immunogenicity is in the form of neutralizing antibodies that would be against the VSV-G protein on the surface of the VLVs. We can do a single inoculation or single injection, and then if we want to do a subsequent injection, we do a trick called seroswitch, where we switch the VSV-G serotype to a different one that's not recognized by antibodies that neutralize the first one. So then we can do at least 2 applications.
Thanks for the presentation. Do you mind going a little bit deeper into the preclinical work that you've already completed, specifically the type of model, how many animals you're looking at?
So we've done, I didn't have time to go into that, we've done both acute and chronic HPV mouse models. And in the acute model, where we had at least 6 mice per group, we had a complete protection of the mice with our armed VLV, or HPV armed VLV, and no protection of the mice with an unarmed VLV. So in other words, the armed VLV behaved like a prophylactic vaccine. On the therapeutic side, we performed experiments in a chronic mouse setting where you infect the mouse with a virus that carries HPV into the liver. And then we treat with VLV, and we found that 40% of the VLV-armed treatment group was cleared of HPS antigen, which is a major biomarker of chronic infection in humans and in this mouse model. So those are two important efficacy models that we've performed. We've only initiated scale up and the usual other sort of preclinical things before going into GMP. And this is what we're working on.
So you talked about what's got to be done to get the product to approval and launch. As investors, I think we would be looking at what has to be done to get us an exit. And so can you talk about who's interested in having this in their portfolio? Is this a single exit, multiple exits, since there are multiple therapeutic areas? How does that play out?
Well, there's a couple of different scenarios. There's potential partnerships for either the HBV program to carry that to phase 3 and beyond, or taking the platform itself and developing their own therapeutic vaccine for disease X. Their other exits would be dependent on what the board of directors obviously would like and when they would want to, and that could include an IPO at some stage after initial funding through the phase 1.
Can you just give some more specificity? I know you mentioned prophylactic vaccine, you mentioned therapeutic vaccine. There's also different levels of severity in the patient population. Can you just give some more color around that kind of?
Time is up, but just a quick answer, please.
Okay. We are looking to treat therapeutically. You're right. There's a spectrum of patient population. We've been talking with a key opinion leader in the area. He believes that treating as young as possible, maybe not in the pediatric population, but treating those who are chronic as young as possible, even before they show signs of hepatitis, might actually have a better chance of curing them than if you wait until they're having signs of hepatitis.
Thanks.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Okay, next I'd like to present Jason Sperling, who's presenting on behalf of Carfigo.
Thank you. Okay. Just forward, backward. Okay, thank you very much for having us. Again, Jason Sperling presenting the HeartCat cryoablation system on behalf of Carfigo. We're a preclinical company treating a very common medical problem. Atrial fibrillation is the most common rhythm disorder seen in clinical practice. About 5 million people is just the United States alone. We had about 1 million people with AFib each year. It's a lot of money spent on it, and AFib causes people to have exercise intolerance, fatigue, loss of productivity, but also importantly, it's a major cause of stroke, hospitalizations, heart failure, dementia, and decreased life expectancy. It's also a profit center for hospitals, and in terms of its treatment, the most common treatment is for early stage atrial fibrillation called paroxysmal atrial fibrillation, which is intermittent form of this rhythm problem. And this is a catheter treatment through the groin that is meant to treat these 4 veins that join up to the left atrium heart chamber. And that is actually pretty good. It works about 60 to 70% of the time for this early stage AFib. The problem is that AFib is a progressive disease, and 2/3 of all AFib is persistent or long-standing persistent AFib. And when you try to treat it with catheter ablation, you need to go outside of the veins and into the main body of the left atrium itself, the back wall. It's about the size of your palm. It's a very big treatment area, and it's very hard to treat with catheters, and that's why the single procedure efficacy drops. And of course, on the scene recently over the past few years is something called hybrid ablation, which combines catheter ablation with an outside of the heart treatment to use to ablate the back wall of the left atrium with a surgical device that's delivered with a videoscopic technique, minimally invasive. And this is fantastic because it works 60 to 80% of the time. There's one device on the market now, who will be our main competitor, a publicly traded company called AtriCure. They have a 510K cleared device. They sold about 2,500 units in 2017. Each device is about $12,000 a piece. They just completed enrollment for IDE PMA trial this year. It's going to be reported next year, and it's going to be a positive trial. I think I was one of the PIs. What you can see here is the market is very underpenetrated. 300,000 ablations a year in the United States for these 5 million patients. Almost all of them are for paroxysmal AFib, a very small minority for hybrid ablation. How we compete with our competitor AtriCure is our device, the HeartCat, is a much bigger device. These green caterpillar-looking things are, that's the AtriCure device. It suctions onto the heart from the outside, delivers 30 watts of energy. You need 25 to 30 of these applications with the AtriCure device, which is a heating energy called radio frequency. Ours is a much larger footprint. It's a deployable, minimally invasive device. It comes collapsed, you deliver it behind the heart. And we use cryothermy, which is a different type of ablation energy. It's a freezing technology. And cryothermy is thought to be a much safer form of ablation than radiofrequency and other heating ablations. And one of the main features is that, and it's the Achilles heel of the AtriCure device, is that our device is engineered to ablate through fat. And a lot of human left atria have some or a lot of fat on the back of the heart, and RF devices can't really power through that. Our device was engineered to be able to ablate through the fat, and we've proven this in a bench model. We've actually, here's a picture of the HeartPad prototype. You see it being essentially birthed from its delivery cannula. It's got a couple of components. It's got the ablation component. We're delivering ultra-cold helium gas, minus 250 degrees Celsius. It's got embedded sensors to help guide the procedure. And importantly, it has this insulation balloon, which pushes it away from adjacent structures and prevents collateral damage, which is super important in treating atrial fibrillation with any technology. This was our single animal test done in Minneapolis last year. This was a live animal. It was a swine. And the human left atrium is only about 1.5 to 2 millimeters thick. This was actually a ventricular ablation, which showed that we actually have cooling power to ablate to almost 20 millimeters depth, and it was confirmed by histologic analysis at the PRL laboratory to be confirmed for cryonecrosis. So extremely encouraging and kind of moved us to the next phase. This is our pericardial access cannula. It's how we get to the area behind the heart. It's a small incision right below the chest, kind of in the upper abdomen. We do this in the electrophysiology laboratory with the current device. And this is going to be a separate FDA application and also expand the field of therapeutics. And it's a pretty neat device. It's got an embedded high-def video single-use device. Path to market, hoping for a 510K submission Q4 19. Clearance sometime in 2020, and then clinical trial after that with a PMA. First in humans sometime next year with a feasibility study sponsored by FDA pre-510K, and exit really anytime after first in human, but especially after efficacy is demonstrated, and the exit will be with a strategic partner who is already a strong position in the catheter ablation space, because our device is meant to be done concomitantly with a catheter ablation in the same setting. This is how Series A is what we're after right now. $8 million Series A round to take us through 510K, everything that comes with it, and early market launch. Scientific advisory board adding some of these. Some of these are very well-known guys in the field. This is a worldwide cryoballoon expert, and this was the national principal investigator for AtriCure's IDE trial that closed this year. That's our executive team, and it looks like I'm done. That's hard to do.
So, to compete or get market adoption ultimately, do you have to be as effective as AtriCure but safer? Or are you trying to be more effective like we're?
So we should be better, faster, stronger, safer. Yeah, quicker procedures, more efficacious because we can ablate through fat, safer because it's cryothermy instead of radiofrequency energy. So pretty much everything we take advantage of being the second device in this particular hybrid market. I think we're strongly positioned to be a much better solution to this problem.
But which of those attributes will you be able to test at the time you have 510K?
So at the time we test 510K, we'll see how often patients are cured of their persistent atrial fibrillation. So efficacy will be the first and most important thing to treat. Safety comes along with it. What sort of complications patients are experiencing?
Does this happen quickly?
Yeah, they're mostly inflammatory complications related to fluid accumulating around the heart. So those would be the big ones.
Great, thanks for the presentation. So obviously this catheter ablation in general is a pretty hot space these days. A lot of the money is being thrown into ablation. And you mentioned one competitor. I'm curious if you've done additional competitive diligence on stuff that's not necessarily already approved, but is also in the development pipeline. And if it's the hybrid aspect of the part that differentiates you from the competitors? Or?
So the differentiator is the ability to treat a very large area of atrium in one single setting. So AtriCure is the only company we know of who has technology specifically targeting the posterior wall. We're keeping our eye on the space. We don't know anybody who's developing anything. Part of our scientific advisory board's job is to tell us if there's anything interesting coming out, because most of them are electrophysiologists in the catheter space, and that's where the most competitive stuff would come from. Our companies and our colleagues in the catheter space want catheters to be able to do this, and that's where kind of the most exciting disruptive technology would be to us. I hope we get there at some point in the future, but there's really nothing that we see of that can do a good job on the posterior wall. It's just too big. That's the problem.
So just a quick follow-up on this, you mentioned kind of a single shot approach.
Yeah.
Have you looked at the efficacy differences between point-by-point ablation versus a single shot approach that you're?
Yeah, I mean, so we know that from the catheter world. So basically, with catheter ablation for persistent atrial fibrillation, we know its single procedure efficacy is multiple studies produced in the scientific literature. That's really about 20-something percent, 20-30%, very low. You add another ablation a few months later, you may pick up another 10%, 5-10%, another ablation later. That can be pretty taxing on patients. Each one of these catheter ablation procedures can be 6, 7, 8 hours long, and they all come with the individual risk. So the idea of single shot efficacy is actually really important, and that's where even most catheter technologies are going to single shot efficacy, with companies like Apama being brought by Boston Scientific to be a single shot procedure for pulmonary vein ablation, whereas pulmonary vein ablation was kind of the gift that keeps on giving for the EPs. They kept coming back for more procedures.
Who needs this in their portfolio that's likely to be an acquirer or licensee for you?
I think any company any strategic that wants to be big in the AFib space needs to have technology for catheter ablation. It needs to have good mapping technology to guide the catheter procedures, and needs to have something to be able to treat this very large bucket of persistent AFib. So I think any strategic who's already in the catheter and mapping space will be a possible acquirer for us.
Great, we're out of time. Thank you, Jason. Okay, next up we have Raki Gupte, Radisson Biotech.
Good afternoon. I'm the CEO of Radisson Biotech, and we are developing innovative therapies for triple-negative breast cancer. We are raising $1 million in this seed funding this round. Breast cancer is the second highest killer disease in women, and it is clinically subdivided into 3 subtypes. The third subtype is called as a triple-negative breast cancer, which has no growth or hormonal receptors. It is the most aggressive type of breast cancer with prevalence rate of 15%, very poor survival rate, and high recurrence rate. Most importantly, there is not a single targeted therapy available in the market for TNBC. Therefore, we are addressing unmet need. We have identified a novel molecular marker, RP, for TNBC, which is directly involved in DNA replication. We have validated the candidacy of this biomarker for drug development using our 2 proprietary RNAi therapy, for which we have 2 US patents, and we found that in vivo it was able to inhibit cancer cells by greater than 60%, and in vivo it was able to inhibit tumor growth by greater than 65%. Therefore, we concluded that RP is an excellent target for drug development. So we developed small molecules with 2 mechanisms of action. In the first group, we have RY2004, which inhibits the nuclear transport of RP. It inhibits cancer cells by greater than 40%. It is selective for only cancer cells, and currently we are developing second-generation derivatives for this molecule with Albany Research. The second group of novel molecules directly inhibit RP. We have conducted CAD analysis with Albany Molecular Research, and we have shortlisted 8 compounds after 3 levels of screening, which are currently undergoing in vitro testing. We are also in the process of filing provisional patent for these compounds. So the advantages of our therapy over existing therapies: it is the first therapy for triple-negative breast cancer. It directly targets DNA replication, so the cancer cells cannot find a roundabout. It does not damage DNA, therefore there is minimal cell toxicity. It selectively targets only cancer cells, and it will work on all kinds of breast cancer. We have 2 US patents for RNA therapy. We are filing provisional for the small molecules and 2 patents for companion diagnostics. All the IP belongs to Radisson Biotech. This brings us to market analysis. The global anti-breast cancer market is expected to reach $18.2 billion in 2020. Of that, TNBC market is expected to reach $2.73 billion. So if we anticipate 1%, 5%, or 10% market penetration, these are the number of revenues the licensing company will seek. And please note that the prevalence, unfortunately, the prevalence rate of breast cancer is over 1 million per year, so you can make the math, calculate the math for the amount of revenues that they will generate. This is a short list of our competitors. Note that none of the drug targets for which the drugs are currently available directly target cell multiplication, therefore there is high chances of developing resistance for these therapy and high chances for developing recurrence. We anticipate that we will complete preclinical trials by mid of 2021. We need $1 million for in vitro testing and $10 million for in vivo testing. By mid-2021, we'll go for IND filing, and by 2022, we will go for phase 1 clinical trial, for which we will need another $10 million. The timeline is just an estimate and can change. So of the seed round that we will raise for this round, we will use 60% for R&D expenses, in vitro testing for lead molecules, 40% for G&A expenses. The total amount that we are raising now is $1 million, and the estimated timeline is 12 months. We'll either go for licensing or selling our technology to larger pharmaceutical companies, or we will go for acquisition. So to sum up the talk, we have developing the first targeted therapy for TNBC. We are addressing an unmet need. We have identified a novel biomarker or drug target. It is a non-receptor based therapy, therefore it will work for all kinds of breast cancer. We have a huge market and we have an exceptionally qualified team. So I have 20 years of academic and pharmaceutical experience in oncology. Roddy is our VP research, he has 18 years of experience. Steve is a group leader for drug development and he has 15 years experience. Dr. Bisay is our VP for business development, he has 30 years of experience. Nick is a corporate advisor and he has started 4 companies, so we get our entrepreneur's perspective from him. Paul is a late stage investor, so we get our investor's perspective from him. Dr. Phillips is a medical oncologist and she routinely sees breast cancer patients and can understand the need for TNBC drugs. And Dr. Hewitz is our advisor for diagnostics. And finally, I would like to thank Life Science Nation for giving us this opportunity to showcase our company.
So this is feedback rather than a question. I think you're not raising enough money because $1 million, getting more in vitro proof of concept is not going to be enough to get your next raise. So if you really want value creation, you should be raising enough to get you the in vivo model, some sort of in vivo model. People still be skeptical because in vivo models don't necessarily predict, but you don't really want to just end with more in vitro work.
I'm going to piggyback on that. My concern, thinking about our members, investors, is they look at that $1 million and $10 million and they go, you know, we're likely to get stomped on and shut out and our value go down. And to your point, Barbara, we'd much rather come in with a higher amount of money and get further and create the value. My other piece of feedback is I really think you're so smart to have a biz dev person at this early stage and be looking at the partnering opportunities and be looking at people that are competitors, not as competitors, but as the possible value creators. That's something we don't see a lot of CEOs do, and you're really smart for doing that.
Yes, so we have talked to partners. We are talking to more after this talk. I'm talking. So we have a couple of companies. We have talked to pharmaceutical, and they have the reason we have such milestone is because they have told us if you finish in vitro, they have their venture arms. So that's when they'll come in. So that's how we have separated our in vitro and millions. So we already have Series A investors. So they want us to finish the entire in vitro and then come back for the Series A. So that's how we got our feedback, and that's how we have presented a breakdown for the money that we need.
I have a question. So the biomarker that you're talking about, RP, just a little bit, if you can clarify. So is this present in all triple negative breast cancer, or is it a certain percentage of them?
No, it's present in all proliferating cells, but in normal cells, it is tightly controlled. It only goes wackadoodle in cancer cells. So it's not just breast cancer specific. So that allows us to have more indications than breast cancer. But right now, we're just focusing on breast cancer.
Sorry, so I have just another question as well as feedback related to Barbara and Lyn's comments. In terms of the $1 million that you're looking for to complete the in vitro work, have you considered, are you also speaking to non-dilutive sources of financing, like, granting organizations?
Yes,
in terms
yes,
of
yes,
fundraising?
SBI, yes, we'll be sending one in January.
Great.
I had a related question to the target. Do you think, it looks like you're not going to be completely eradicated, you're not going to get tumor regression based on this target? I mean, are you going to have to, it looks like in vitro you're getting some inhibition, but not actual disappearance.
Yeah, I mean, that's tricky because if we have to have some number of calculation, we cannot let all the cells die, so we, had certain time frame in which we check the.
Okay.
So if we go beyond that time, we actually see the cells logging off. And when we have a comparison with non-breast cancer cells, they are still intact. So we have to have some kind of time frame where we can do a calculated.
Okay, thank you very much, Rahim. Okay, our next speaker is Ken McLeod for Synostics.
Correct.
We have
Excellent. Ready to go? Am I blocking you? Can you see?
Perfect.
All right, very good. I'm Ken McLeod. I'm CEO of Synostics, and Synostics develops pacemakers for your second hearts. Many, maybe most of you don't realize you have second hearts, but you have to have a second heart. As you are all sitting there, as I'm standing here, gravity is pulling all the fluid in our body down into our feet and legs, and it's got to get back up into our circulatory system. How does it get back up? It gets back up because we have specialized muscles in the calves of our legs called the soleus muscles. These pump the fluid back up to our heart. It's so important. We could not be upright without our soleus muscles, and so we tend to refer to them as our second hearts. Unfortunately, about 50% of adults have second heart insufficiency. So this is where Synostics comes in. This is our first generation pacemaker. We brought it on the market about 2 years ago. It is a reflex stimulation device. It activates mechanoreceptors on the frontal plantar surface, triggers a reflex heart, causing the soleus muscles to contract. We stimulate for a period of about 60 seconds. That allows the muscle to fully contract, and then we pause, allowing the muscle to refill, the venous sinuses in the muscle, to refill with interstitial fluid and blood. And then the process is repeated. That's why I refer to it as a pacemaker. This is based on technology developed at the State University of New York, and it's licensed from the State University of New York. Our key markets are primary care, Medicaid performing providers, employee wellness, and also we have a consumer market. Again, we've been on the market for about 2 years. We've been growing at about 12% a month, or roughly 4x a year. What we're looking to do now is, of course, expand. The reason we've been able to grow at this rate is that, as you can imagine, there's a remarkable number of complications associated with second heart insufficiency. The obvious ones are things like lower leg swelling, but things like nighttime leg cramps. Over 30% of individuals over 60 have severe nighttime leg cramps. The bone loss in the elderly, as we all know, osteopenia is a serious concern. Varicose veins we often think of as a cosmetic issue, but it is not. Varicose veins will progress to venous insufficiency, which can progress to a deep vein thrombosis, which can lead to a pulmonary embolism, and of course that can kill you. So this is not simply a cosmetic issue. Then of course, if this fluid is not coming back to your heart, cardiac output falls. On average, as you've all been sitting here for a half an hour, your cardiac output has fallen about 20%. If you have very poor second heart activity, it's probably fallen 35, 40%. And so your metabolic rate is based on your cardiac output. Metabolic rate drops, you're going to end up with issues like chronic fatigue, you're going to have issues like weight gain, and very commonly, you probably all know somebody like this whose hands and feet are cold all the time. And that's a clear sign of second heart failure. We've done about 15 clinical studies so far looking at the effectiveness of the heart partner to be able to reverse these various conditions. Not only can we reverse the conditions, which is nice, but in fact we can retrain the soleus muscles so that once they're trained up, you just have to maintain the muscle, and all of these conditions will disappear. While those are all very fun markets and nice markets, the big market for us is dementia prevention. We currently have about 5 million people in the United States diagnosed with dementia. There is no cure for dementia. We're spending about $50,000 a year treating each of these individuals, and as all of us baby boomers progress into our 80s, that number is expected to triple. Okay? There's no cure, but we know how to prevent dementia. The primary cause of dementia is chronically low blood flow to the brain for years, okay? And so all you have to do is maintain that blood flow. You maintain blood flow by maintaining cardiac output. You can maintain cardiac output by exercising. Almost any exercise slows or reverses cognitive aging. The issue is, this is what we do as Americans. And the older you get, the more likely this is what you're doing all day long. The average American sits for 13 hours a day. It's almost impossible to get the elderly exercising and maintaining those exercise programs. But this is a version of passive exercise. Using this, you put it under your desk, you put it in front of your easy chair, and you can easily use it for a couple hours a day. And our data, as you can see, demonstrates that we can in fact reverse cognitive aging. So this is a high margin product. We sell it for about $800 or $66 a month if you want to do a monthly plan. Our total cost to the door is $200, so we have about a 75% profit margin. There's competition out there, but the competition is really symptomatic relief. There's nothing addressing the retraining of the soleus muscle. This is our team. I'm coming from the technical side of it. Kyle, who's sitting right behind you, is a serial entrepreneur on the marketing side, and Tina is our clinical sales rep with about 25 years of experience. We formed as a Delaware C Corp in 2014. We've raised about $3 million to get to this stage, get our first generation heart partner out there, marketed. We now want to expand nationally and internationally, and as well go to our second generation product, which would be electromagnetic, allowing us to create a completely portable product. So with that, we've been growing at about, again, 3 or 4x a year, so we continue to do that, at least for the next several years, we anticipate. Thank you very much. I apologize for going over. Yes?
Thank you. So given that you've been on the market for 2 years, you're doing outcomes data, and what do you want?
Outcome data in terms of clinical data or just outcome?
In terms of patients, because you said it retrains, right? It retrains.
Oh yes, we have those 15 studies.
Okay.
So they come from both the clinical, formal clinical studies, but also we have quite a bit of outcome data, like why do people buy it? So we do have people buying it for claims that we do not make. Like it's very popular for diabetics who have diabetic neuropathy, because we're increasing blood flow in the feet and legs by 50%. So that's going to regenerate, you get nerve regeneration. So there's a number of reasons why people buy it.
But it's not necessarily based on the
but
data, and
not-
what your claims are.
Not necessarily based on our claim. Weight loss is a huge reason why people buy it, for example, because it raises your metabolic rate. You raise your metabolic rate, you burn more calories. And so that's a very popular reason to buy it. So we don't have clinical trials on weight loss, but that's a very popular outcome.
So is there anything that you can do with biofeedback, with data collection, that on a subscription basis that makes this a recurring revenue as opposed to a one-time purchase?
Yes, there are. I mean, things that individuals ask for is I lose track. You know, we tell them when they're first starting in 3 months or so, using it for 2 to 3 hours a day, not continuously, but over the course of a day, 2 to 3 hours, and people lose track of how long have I used my heart partner. A lot of people, it's under their desk. A lot of professional women use it, yes, exactly. And so just that kind of simple feedback would be viewed as very, very positive. And then getting back to your question, is the comparison thing. You know, I'm using this to lose weight. Here's what's happening to me, what's happening to you. So we do see a number of opportunities to do kind of cloud computing type feedback to the population of individuals who own them. Yes. Yes.
How do you measure soleus capacity? Like, what is it that you're measuring?
We normally measure cardiac output.
Cardiac.
That's what we normally look at. That's the easiest thing to look at. You can actually look at leg volume, but it's a noisier measurement. Cardiac output, electrical impedance plasmography is a nice, clean way to measure cardiac output. And so that's tend to be what you can look at very simply. People ask that at home, how do I know it's working? We say, watch your blood pressure. As you sit, your blood pressure is going to drop as you pool, and you turn the device on, your blood pressure is going to climb back up to normal. So that's an indirect way of getting to cardiac output.
And sort of a really stupid question of why do you need a device to do this? Like, why can't
You don't.
Oh, okay.
You can just, ballet dancers don't
Right,
have this
you can-
issue. You can just stand on your toes for 2-3 hours a day, and you're golden. Just do this for about 2 hours, okay, and you're fine. So if you're really into Tai Chi, if you squat, the reason Americans have this issue is our ancestors squatted when we rested. We do this. If you squat, your soleus muscles will be awesome. Okay, so in principle, you don't need it.
Okay.
In reality, everybody needs it, yes. Yes, sir.
How do we get our $5 million back?
How do you get your $5 million back? We could do it through a dividend. At this growth rate, we're going to be cash flush pretty quickly. The second device, as I was talking about, the electromagnetic, we intend to put it into an insole and probably partner with somebody like Bayer, who owns Dr. Scholl's. And so then that, undoubtedly on that side, on the consumer side, would probably end up as a merger acquisition. So we might carve out the consumer product and keep the medical side of it as we roll into medical claims. Because these are all really these are conditions, not medical claims. But if we talk about diabetic neuropathy or we talk about wound healing, those are medical claims. So we could separate the two divisions. So that'd be the quick way out, probably.
Okay, thanks very much, Ken.
All right, thank you.
So next up, we have Mark Semmel, who is representing Digitouch Health.
Hi, I'm Mark Semmel, and I'm CEO of Digitouch Health, and we're developing technology to monitor blood pressure at the press of a button. So today, nearly everyone is at risk for high blood pressure, hypertension, for both heart attacks and strokes. With the recent SPRINT study, the American Heart Association changed the guidelines this past year, and now they lowered the threshold for consideration of hypertension. It's now 100 million people, over 100 million people in the US, roughly a third of all people in the world. And what was shocking to me was the amount of spend, over $400 billion in just hospital costs where hypertension was the primary, secondary diagnosis. We know what to do for people with hypertension, but the problem is that today's arm cuffs are too inconvenient, takes too much time, it's not easy, people forget, and they make mistakes. So they put the cuff on wrong, or they don't even go and buy the cuff, or they buy the wrong size cuff. There's so many failures in this process. And so what we've done is we've created a building block here where we can monitor blood pressure by pressing a button. And that button can be mounted like on a key fob, or it can be mounted to the back of your smartphone case. Right? If you're familiar with AliveCor, they did this for ECG. We can do the same thing. A lot of people have tried to do this. Qantas raised $30 million to spin out of MIT, Scanadu, and many other companies have tried this. But what they did was a different method. They used a technology called pulse transit time. It's like plucking a guitar string and seeing the time that it takes from the wave to go from one end to the other. It's a measure of time that correlates to arterial stiffness. We're measuring blood pressure, so we don't require any calibration. That's the key advantage, and we've shown that we can demonstrate clinical accuracy both in publications in Science and in Nature journals. And it's a video, which I have no time to show you here, that you can see from our website. And with this technology now, we can then link it to an app, right, that will link in your activity, your diet, your stress level, other markers of your cardiovascular status, right, to now get a full picture of your cardiovascular health. And then with that information, we can then personalize your therapy, right? So this technology is the hook for this platform, right? That it gets people to engage with their provider, right? That gets those people that show up to the emergency room, you see they have blood pressure, and then they don't go do all the things that they're supposed to, right? And with that, we can engage with them. We can then get the data to build the predictive algorithms that will then allow us to titrate your medication. So if you have hypertension, you might need different drugs than what you might need, right? Do the clinical studies to optimize that therapy, ultimately with the goal of providing a longer health span at reduced cost. I have an outstanding team. We've all worked together for the past 6 years building a hospital monitor that we just recently launched in anesthesiology for cardiac output, of all things, actually. So I've raised money mostly from the Pritzker family, who funded the previous technology, and they'll be funding this as well. Rama Makamla, the inventor of the hospital monitor technology, came up with this as well. So we've commercialized both of these out of Michigan State. It's covered by 4 patents, including one that's already been allowed. I recently hired Jeff Reynolds and Alex Markovich, both out of Bayer. they did the connected glucose meter product. So Jeff did all the hardware, you know, the Bluetooth, the power management, making the device easy and simple to use, and taking that cost out of it. We can turn that same crank for our product. Alex did all of the software, the app, the cloud-based system, connection to the EMR, all the things on both iOS and all the different Android platforms. So we have all the pieces in place to build this product. We'll be doing the work at Columbia. The Cardiovascular Center for Behavioral Health will do all our studies. It's a tremendous opportunity to quickly increase revenue to quite a large number. Just think of the number of people who have hypertension, and you might say, well, how do these types of things get adopted at this rate? We'll look at Fitbit, look at GoPro, all the technologies out there. We're not going after just the cuff market. We're going after the 100 million people that have bought a Fitbit or a smartwatch. We'll be selling at $100 a unit, and then slowly cost reducing from there as we're adopting. So you can see this is quite feasible. We've already had $3 million into the company's development of the technology. We're raising $2.5 million with several funds already in. The American Heart Association has also submitted a term sheet to get through FDA clearance and then launch the product in the next round. So with that, I'll conclude, and thank you very much.
Is there any way to take your technology and get it to work with the device that I already own? I mean, it's, you know, I always think the last thing I want is one more thing to have to carry around, charge up, remember to use.
Right, well, so look, our focus right now is obviously getting through FDA clearance, but we view ourselves as kind of a module company. So there's a path where we sell a standalone product that would be like this, that could also hop onto your smartphone case, but there's certainly a way where we can license the module to be incorporated into any number of devices. So Livongo, I talked with them, they want to put a button on their glucose meter, right? So they can get both data points with one. So that's certainly the strategy that Masimo took with their pulse oximeters. We'd like to do the same thing.
You mentioned a couple of studies that you've done in publications in Science and Nature.
Yes.
I have 2 questions. Can you talk specifically about how the device is actually measuring blood pressure, and also sort of related, how many patients and how you tested accuracy and validity?
Right, so these were the studies done in academia that Rama published, and the way it works is oscillometry. That's how an automatic cuff works, right? So you know, you inflate and you slowly deflate, and it's looking for the tiny oscillations. Where those oscillations are maximized, that's the mean blood pressure. That's where the exterior pressure is the same as the internal pressure. And this is shown in the video, but simply instead of inflating a cuff, the user is the actuator, and they're depressing their finger on an artery here. It's the transverse palmar arch artery, and we're looking at the oscillations in the blood volume with a photoplethysmograph, right, a PPG, and then we're looking at the applied pressure with a pressure sensor, a thin film like in your touchscreen, right? It's that thin, like a dime, and by slowly pressing on that button over 20 seconds, we're able to sweep the pressure range that we need to calculate your blood pressure.
If a patient goes home with a prescription and buys the product, are there any avoided costs? Are there avoided visits, avoided return to the doctor to check how they're doing on medication? Or is it more just all upside?
Well, I think, you know, it depends on the patient, right? So if we go back, I can't go back, but the care platform, right, allows us to upload that data to the cloud. So instead of, you know, you having to go and make an appointment, your doctor can say, look, I think you need to do this. I can call it directly to the pharmacy. A lot of pharmacists adjust medication for hypertension now, so you wouldn't have to go back to the doctor. You just go to your CVS and they'll, you know, change the dosage of your medication. So that is true.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
like to introduce Greg Burdea, Bright Cloud International.
Thank you. And thank you for allowing me to present my company and my product. I'm the founder and CEO. So what is a problem? Stroke is a silent killer. In the 10 minutes allowed for me, 15 people in the US will have a stroke. You probably have some of relatives or parents who have had a stroke. The good news is with the new medication they live. A lot more people live than they used to. However, the therapy for them, what happens after the stroke, is still pretty much in the Stone Ages. We want to bring it to the 21st century. The way we do it, and because it's insufficient, it's fractionated, it's expensive, and still a $34 billion market. This is our solution. We have an integrated FDA Class 1 device that provides therapy through therapeutic games, which we own. They are intensive, they are engaging, they have built-in data analytics, which is uploaded to the cloud so the clinician can remotely see what's going on. And more importantly, they treat the patient as the patient is. Mind, body, and soul together. Single point of care, you can see where the economy of cost is and the efficacy goes up. Okay? And you see the person interacts with both arms. These are adaptable games, AI built in. They adapt each person. And by using both arms, not like one finger or a joystick, you engage both halves of the brain, which is so important. Okay, it also has indications for TBI, dementia, and chronic pain with no opioids. Right? Okay, so this is where we are. As I mentioned, it's a Class 1 device listed. First sales this quarter. We will enhance it with an additional proprietary product next year, and we look at exit in 5 years probably by buyout from a pharma company because we complement them so nice. We have a long track of R&D, and I'm also a faculty at Rutgers for 31 years. So many studies mostly funded by NIH, some by DOD. So what's the target market? There are over 1,200 hospitals with neurology clinics in the US alone. This is all US market, of course it can go international. The outpatient clinics, $40 billion market per year, rehab alone, okay? The home, this is probably to me the most appealing thing, in the sense that unfortunately 700,000 new Americans get the stroke every year, but unfortunately also nothing is being done in current medical practice in the US once you pass the 9 months. They want to convince the family that nothing can be done and the person just has to live the rest of his life or her life the way he reached the plateau he reached at 9 months. That is far from true. In my experience, I can give you one quick story. I took somebody who was 15 years after. I trained him in his home for 1 month. After that, he became 35% faster in his daily life and 30% stronger with no meds. Did I mention depression also goes down? Of course. Okay, I have 2 competitors in the clinical side. I have nobody in the home side. Both are products, OmniVR and Gentronics, but they don't have my tracking, accurate tracking of the arms, which is how do you interact. They don't have, the most important, they don't have built-in artificial intelligence that shapes the therapy with each patient. Because you can have a good day, you can have a bad day. The therapy has to adapt so they can win, always win. And they definitely don't measure how strong you grasp or not. So this is what our product does. Okay? So, so far we have raised $3 million from NIH, non-dilutive. We have 6 issued patents and 3 pending. We're looking for $2 million in seed because we do want to have a national network. So we have to have distributors, we have to do manufacturing. I want to hire a professional marketing force. Half of the money will go there. And IP protection, because NIH doesn't pay for IP patents. Okay, I'm central to this field. In fact, I named the field virtual rehab, and I literally wrote a book on virtual reality technology. I have a very good director of engineering and many other experts which you need: therapists, neuropsychologists, game designers, and software analytics person. I am in talks with a very good experienced marketing guy, and also finalizing arrangement with a very experienced business advisor, and I have the clinical advice. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, it's very interesting. Can you just touch a little bit more on, how long, what kind of games these patients are playing to help, stimulate their brain,
yes.
And then...
So there is something called integrative medicine. Normally when you talk about integrative, you think of yoga, acupuncture, meditation. This is a form of computerized integrative medicine. In other words, you treat different cognitive areas. Each game, however, has to be played through physical action, and if I want, I can also add wrist weight so the person also strengthens the shoulder so you can put your arm wherever. And we do a baseline so they adapt. Therefore, they always win. Therefore, they're super motivated. The intensity, that's also an important thing. Because what we do really is rewiring the brain. Maybe that was your question. We're rewiring the brain, and therefore we're not subject to the pharma loss of efficacy. Right? So to rewire, you need a high, like I have an order or more, 100 times more intensive number of repetitions than in outpatient clinics. So I can do the person at home with the caregiver, the wife, they can play together, which is super motivating. I also have in clinics at Walter Reed, we did a study on TBI, another population, where I had two systems side by side. It was one therapist overseeing. So we're looking into, engaging, meeting them. And an important thing, we are probably the only company in the US that provides also a Spanish game option for rehab, because language is so important to cognition, and if I can break that barrier and offer it in Spanish, I know how to do better. Sorry.
Is this prescribed by physicians and potentially
Yes,
reimbursed?
yes. It can be reimbursed. In fact, I did a calculation, and it's extremely appealing for them. I have 4 codes, existing codes. I don't need new codes. Just 4 existing codes that they can use, and they charge by 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So in 1 hour, they can have 4 codes. I can figure out at maximum use, one system can generate tens of thousands for one clinic. One system per month. Yes.
I guess I had a related question.
Yeah.
Are you selling to physical therapists, or are you selling to the home, or what is
All
it?
right. So the first market we're going with is skilled nursing facilities, physical therapy, and hospitals. Occupational therapy. The
So it's
second,
1 unit per,
it could be 1 or multiple units per clinic.
okay.
Preferably multiple, if you
Yeah.
ask me. But then the real market, it will be the home, because it's nothing. It's nothing. Yes.
So you said, if I heard you correctly, that pharma companies would want to acquire this.
If they're
and
smart.
Add it to their portfolio.
Yes.
That's counterintuitive to me. So can you explain
Absolutely.
how this would add value
Absolutely.
for them?
Think about opioids and non-opioids for chronic pain. They want to get out of being liable for opioids, right? They go to something that doesn't. Dementia, they know they failed. 100 new drugs failed for dementia. I made somebody who couldn't read for years read again in 3 weeks. So they want to diversify and de-risk, they come to me. I don't want to be a competitor, I want to be a partner. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you so much.
Next, I'd like to introduce Elena Diaz. She's presenting for A2A Pharmaceuticals. Yes, it's for this side, and this laser in the middle.
So hello everybody, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to showcase our company. My name is Elena, I'm the Director of Business Development for A2A Pharmaceuticals. So our mission is to leverage computational system and AI for developing new drugs for hard-to-drug targets, for specifically cancer, bacterial infections, and muscular dystrophy. So if we think about like a drug interacting with its target, like a key fits in its lock as an analogy, right? This is what happened with traditional computational systems. They fail to generate high quality candidates. So we're trying to avoid that because they generate different, so they look at all the keys in the system to fit that lock, which all the commercially available libraries or compounds, and the chances of that happening is really low. So we try to avoid that by looking at the target. We look at its property, its shape, we identify different hotspots, and very specifically tailor our libraries of compounds to feed that specific target. So our targets, in this case, are our keys, so our molecules. We started by very, very small fragments, like microfragments, and built that thousands of hundreds of libraries of compounds by binding all those different fragments and checking specific hotspots in our targets. So we create highly selective molecules for each of the specific targets. We use AI to help to introduce different multi-descriptors and drug-like properties to iterative cycles of improvements. Like that, we generate highly selective molecules. So as all technology we can consider as a matchmaker, we, as well as keys feed in the lock, we create highly selective molecules for each specific target. So this could be applied to many different diseases. It's very versatile technology, and I'll show you the pipeline later on. So our business model is very much focused on partnerships. We like to include, value creation to our partners, as well with our technology, as well as with our knowledge in the different diseases. So we specialize, as I mentioned, in difficult drug targets where others have failed, mainly protein-protein interactions, because other technologies have different challenges to overcome this. But with Sculpt, which is the name of our technology, we have proven to do that successfully. So we have significant achievement to date. We raised some funding from San Francisco and in IndieBio. We also entered a 50-50 partnership with the Fortunate Management of Pharmacyclics. They call Biomed Fusion with our leukemia program, which we expect to file IND next year. Also, some partnerships we've done with like Novartis and P&G, bigger pharmaceuticals. Those are pilot projects, as well as other more recent partnership with In Silico Medicine, another AI company to develop therapies for Duchenne. We have won the J&J Innovation Challenge for AI and drug development, so which that was a good validation of our technology and give us a space here in New York. So we're really happy about that. And in terms of financing, we have raised $5 million to date, and we're raising $20 million to bring at least 2 or more of a program to IND every year. So this is only possible with our great team. We have PhDs in chemistry, biochemistry, AI, and computational chemistry, as well as investment and C-level executive from pharmaceutical experience. At the moment, Sotir is the chairman of the board. He's the CMO of Ipsen. He's working in Novartis and Celgene and others. And we're also looking to expand our board of advisors as well. So again, briefly comment, our pipeline is quite diverse because of our technology. We have programs in oncology, like MLN Menin program, the JAK-TIT solid tumors, as well as non-nucleotide STING, and RAF51, so DNA repair. In terms of antibacterial, we have a LPXC, which is a non-hydroxamide group, so it's not toxic. That's overcome most of the challenges that has been at the moment in the clinic. We also have other Duchenne, as I mentioned, and type 2 diabetes. I can explain a little bit more in some of your questions, but in 5 minutes I don't have time to go through everything. But we have different stages of our programs. Closer to IND would be all MLN Menin program, and the others are in lead optimization. So the MLN program, just to give you a flavor, in 4 months and 25K, we raised at the same level as our competitor, which is the University of Michigan, and we were able to even surpass selectivity and potency with our molecules. We're right now in finishing PK/PD studies, and as I mentioned, we'll do IND next year. So as a summary, we have collaborators like Novartis, J&J, P&G, Pharmacyclics, and so on, that back us up our work and our technology. We have awarded technology as well as successfully raised $5 million, and hopefully raising $20 million as well. We have our technology is novel to generate also novel therapeutics for hard-to-drug targets. And basically, our aim is to reduce by 50% or more the development of drugs, which is quite costly, $2 billion or 20 years for development. So thank you so much, and thank you for your listening.
So I invested in an Israeli company that attempted to do what you're doing, and when the partnerships weren't renewed, they failed. And of course, lost the investment in them.
Right.
So if you could tell us a little bit about what you're doing with P&G and Novartis so that they continue to build on the pilot and stay with you.
Exactly, makes sense. So initially it was a pilot project, so we said let's show you what we can do.
Yeah.
That was earlier on in our story, right? So basically they gave us a target, we designed drugs for them, and at the moment they are synthesizing and evaluating. So as a part of our engagement, we said, if those come out positive, we'll probably continue, the partnership with them. So we still have to wait for some of those results first. A different type of partnership, like not big pharma, will be like biotech, like for example, Biomea Fusion, which is the formats management of pharmacyclics and in silico medicine. We are doing a 50-50 partnership, so we do like C Corps or like a joint venture to advance certain target, certain molecule, and to the market. Yep.
So conceptually, I'm still a little unclear about what your secret sauce is. You can tell me the actual secret, but
we can't tell you.
Other people do fragment-based designs. I mean, so what is so novel?
Yeah, so we use the fragment-based as well as machine learning. So we have a bottom-top approach instead of top-bottom approach because we don't use the same AI. The technology is totally different depending on the target. So we tailor to just be the specific target. For example, for antibacterial, we include in our platform like properties like crossing the wall, not getting the flux out to avoid resistance, right? When we're talking about cancer, it will be a totally different approach. So we tailor specifically. We don't have something that one size fits all, like all the rest of fee-for-service companies, Anything else? Wow, I saved you time here, Greg. Yeah, okay.
So you had put up the slide around the partnerships and the development they have. Do you have any assets that were discovered and then it progressed to in vivo studies?
We are very much in humans and star xenografts in our MLM Menin program. Yeah, definitely. That's an inflection point for us. That would be great to show. Yeah, thank you. Perfect.
Thanks, Elena.
Thank you.
Yes. So, last but certainly not least, John McCauley is representing Greg Tech.
And I'm in awe of all the other prior presenters, but I have demos. Maybe the only thing I am competitive with everybody else on. There's a box on the actual page. So what I'm going to talk about today is a product called Everbeat. My name is John McCauley, CEO of a company called GregTech, medical devices focused on cardiac disease. And, I need the...
I'm sorry.
Great. And really, what problem are we solving? And I think as Jason talked a lot about atrial fibrillation, it's really a terrible disease, and the standard of care is really woefully behind. People are dying unnecessarily. There's a ton of money that's spent taking care of it, unnecessary hospitalizations. Somebody who's AFib goes into the hospital because their heart's racing. They admitted overnight for monitoring. They're told, go home, see your cardiologist, and check your meds, etc. There's a lot of money wasted. We're here to try and solve that problem. But really, we're starting with AFib because we really needed to cut our teeth with the FDA process. Ultimately, what we're moving towards, kind of our vision, is to tackle other forms of heart disease, most notably ischemia. Jason pointed out there's 5 million people in the U.S. with atrial fibrillation today. There's about 16 million people at risk of heart attack from ischemia. So we want to really get there. But we really wanted to build slowly, build a revenue base, build some confidence with the FDA, etc. It's really all about process change for us. The technology, we use a lot of commercial off-the-shelf chips that are integrated in our own printed circuit board design in a unique and novel way, we believe.
but it's less about the technology, it's about process change. Our differentiator is we're really focused on the doctors, the cardiologists, and primary care physicians as customers, and we want to help them improve outcomes for people with AFib and ischemia, and we want to help them make money doing it. And Apple's never going to do that. We'll get to the competitor slide in a minute. This is a photo of the actual device. You see the photoplasmogram chip on the far side. It's got a photoplasmogram PPG for continuously monitoring your heart rate in the background. If it detects an arrhythmia, it tells a patient, stop, take an EKG. You actually go like this with the watch and you create an electrical circuit, you report a clinical grade ECG. That's the basis for a possible AFib. Our predicate device was the AliveCor Cardia mobile device that you put your two fingers on. It's been mentioned by one of the other presenters as well. The center picture is a static picture of our ECG. I tried to get a demo to put it up here, but it's too hard to do. And really, sort of reinforcing the fact that we're really doctor-oriented, there's a lot of effort that's going into our portal to allow physicians to risk rank their patients, see what's going on. They can see a lot of rich data about patients, not only their ECG rhythm strips, but their heart, their blood pressure, their activity, their medication compliance, their symptoms if they record that, their weight, all those things that are important factors in driving your heart care, your heart health. Everybody's heard that Apple's kind of put an ECG chip on their Series 4 watch. They're very consumer-oriented, trying to sell watches. How are we different and better? LiveCor is another competitor. How are we different than Apple? One, our battery lasts 4 to 6 days, depending on how often you're triggering the PPG light sensor. Apple's battery's dead after about 18 hours. So when we're tackling other forms of disease that require you to wear the watch 24/7, we'll be able to do that where you can't with Apple. I have an Apple Watch. It actually doesn't detect my AFib as well as our own device as well, so we think we're better, more effective at designing it. And again, Apple is not really doctor-oriented, they're consumer-oriented, and really where we think we're going to make our bones is helping the doctors deploy all these great technologies successfully against one of the most horrifying diseases that kills so many people every year. 800,000 in 2016 died from heart disease. The key, though, is getting through atrial fibrillation to ischemia. So we've just started breaking ground and designing the next circuit board for a new generation NeuroSky ECG chip that allows, by basically touching a couple points on the body or perhaps by a ring, we're in our debate about that, sort of more leads in a single lead, and that allows us to detect morphologies, heart rhythm morphologies allow us to predict the possibility of upcoming heart attacks. Obviously, we're going to have to do a lot of clinical trials with that. We're still waiting on FDA clearance for V1. The FDA's asked us to do some more clinical trials, yet again, so we'll have to do a lot of work there. The money we're going to ask for in the next couple of slides is really about digging into V2. We've, through seed funding and the management team, we've raised just over $1 million to get V1 to market. We obviously will need some of the cash we're raising to help accelerate growth of the V1 marketplace. Other advantages of V2, we want to have a blood pressure indicator on board. I'll have to speak with the company that actually has to your question about can you integrate it with another product, I'd love to be able to consider that. There are a lot of commercially available chips out there that allow you to detect differential blood pressure, that'll allow you to trend blood pressure, and again, it's another indicator of potential heart deterioration. Battery life, color screen, all the fancy stuff. We think we can crack or help with sleep apnea. Right now you go to a lab for an overnight test. We think there's some preliminary indications that'll give people a sense that perhaps they need to go get it looked at. I wear my watch around the clock. I have a little bit of sleep apnea. We already with V1 are able to see a little bit of the unrest that I experience every night. Our two founder cardiologists are up top. I joined actually because I have AFib. My father died of a stroke. He had AFib, my brother has persistent AFib, I have paroxysmal AFib. So I was intrigued and I invested first and joined as CEO last year. Because one, I believe the problem is terrible. I believe the standard of care is off. I went to my cardiologist to take these 2 pills and come back in a year. Effectively, he's waiting for me to self-select that the population that ends up in the hospital as a stroke. Looks at me, says you're unlikely to do it, so go away. I had to go back to him with a bunch of data and a bunch of ECGs that I'd taken myself. He's never actually seen me in AFib on his 12-lead ECG office machine. He's only ever seen my ECGs that I recorded and showed him. And I talked to him and said, it's getting worse, it's lasting longer, my heart rate's peaking, etc. And he changed my medicine and my AFib has stabilized and is actually improving, reducing in frequency. Great. So our raise is really about getting started on V2, our holy grail. It's about helping to accelerate our marketing efforts on V1. We want to finance some structured sales transactions, and our exit is to sell to a technology firm, maybe one of the big cardiac suppliers, et cetera. Fire away.
Did you talk about how much it's going to
I
cost?
was gonna say, the business model.
Sure, the business model is, our first deal is actually in India for 5,000 units, because we don't need FDA clearance in India. In India, we're actually selling it for roughly $30, 2,400 rupees a month, for a 12-month contract. They don't want to have an upfront cost. In the US, our nominal business model is predicated upon about an average sale price of $184. Retail is $300, but we realize we're going to have to discount that, give some of that to the doctors to help, again, subject to laws and regulations, help them move the product, like with the LiveCore. $184 upfront in the US nominal in our pro forma, with a $10 a month subscription fee to support a monthly report to the patient, their doctor, and ongoing enhancements, et cetera. But it'll vary by market. India did not want an upfront charge. We're working with a home healthcare services company that charges like, $3,000 a month for a daily visit. They're really trying to take advantage of remote patient monitoring technology like this that'll allow them to reduce how many people they have to send to the patient's home. So this is all about taking the technology that's out there and all the brilliant ideas that we heard today and really driving it to the actual process of delivering care to people who are sick. So we're really trying to instantiate process change, leverage a lot of the new technologies, and really we're going to start from a business model perspective in a couple areas. Our doctors are in Brooklyn and in San Diego. So we're just going to sell to electrophysiologists and cardiologists and get some traction. Our pro forma calls for $15 million in sales in 2020. So we think we'll get there when we're going to be attractive enough for a takeout. Yeah.
Hey, John, Vic, this is obviously a huge unmet medical need. We were previous investors in Infobionic and
Oh, sure.
Palma as well. So
I've actually worn the Infobionic MCT.
Yeah.
I didn't detect my result.
So one of the questions that came up previously is, my understanding is this is a continuous ECG monitor, so you're generating a ton of data and a lot of the value is actually that data and
Yes.
and assessing ultimately predictive ability of that data. So have you considered applications of monetizing the data, as well as how do you in your use model filter through the noise of the data, and who's actually, are you triggering the physician when an event happens, or how are the physicians or nurses filtering through the immense amount of data that's being generated?
A couple of questions in there. Can we envision monitoring the data? Absolutely. I skipped through it, but there's a point there that talks, we want to be one of the leading providers of machine learning derived information, et cetera. Not just from the ECG rhythm strips, which is a wealth of data, but also how does it correlate, what are outcomes, how do they correlate to weight gain, how do they correlate to steps or lack of steps, et cetera. So we definitely believe, although we haven't done much with it, and that's probably a big push for us in kind of the next couple of years, we definitely believe there's an opportunity to monetize that data. I think it'll probably be after the takeout versus before, because it's cost significant amount of cost and investment. But we'd love to do that, and we talk about it over our beers and scotches, which I can't have anymore because my AFib, every couple of weeks. I think I'm out of time, but happy to answer any questions or share more information.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much. Thank you, Greg, for running the whole show.
My pleasure. Well, that concludes our session. Let's have a big round of applause for our panel. So as part of the program, we will connect both the presenters and the panel so that you can continue dialogue if you're interested. Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.